So in our previous videos, we've really looked at the chromatic scale, and we've really tried to understand the chromatic scale in terms of sharps, as well as understanding the chromatic scale in terms of flats. So today what I'd like to do is actually take a look at whole steps and half steps. Now, whole steps and half steps are going to be part of what we would look at as basic intervals. So basic intervals are just going to be distances in music, and so these aren't going to be physical distances like we would think of miles or feet or inches. Those are physical distances. These are going to be aural, or more like auditory distances. So the distance between two notes. And so two very important distances that we have are going to be a half step and a whole step. Now, the definitions between for a half step are going to be two consecutive notes. So two consecutive notes. So let's take a look at what a half step would be. And since I underlined it in red, I'm going to use red. And so a half step would be this distance here, from A to A sharp, or from A sharp to B, or from B to C, or from C to C sharp, so on and so forth. I could do this all the way through, from C sharp to D, from D to D sharp. Those would all be considered half steps. It's important to note that here that the B to C, we've talked about this before, but B to C, so this B to C thing is considered a natural half step, and just the same thing as E to F. These are both considered what are called natural half steps because they naturally occur in the chromatic scale. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at a whole step, and we did that in green. So a whole step is going to be something like A to B, and it's skipping over a note. B to C sharp would be considered, that's kind of a lousy looking C sharp there, but B to C sharp would be considered a whole step. C sharp to D sharp would be considered a whole step. Also, something like C to D would be considered a whole step, or A sharp to C would be considered a whole step, or D to E would be considered a whole step. So those are examples of whole steps and half steps. And so now what we're going to go and do is we're going to kind of maybe further our understanding a little bit. And if I asked you a question, if I ask you what is the distance between A sharp and C flat? And so this could be a little bit of a confusing question, I think, to some people, but let's kind of understand it a little bit deeper. So the first thing that we really want to do is understand that C flat is really, and if you recall from a previous video, another way of writing C flat is that it's really just the same thing as B. So now we're really not talking about A sharp and C flat. We're really just talking about A sharp to B. And if we come back up here, we realize, oh, A sharp to B is a half step. Why? Because it's two consecutive notes, and two consecutive notes is always going to be a half step. Now, the problem that's posed with this question is we have a note over here that is written in sharps, and we have a note over here that's written in flats. And that's the thing that tends to make something like this very confusing. We don't want that. We really want everything to be in one system or another. So I like to think of sharps as being, maybe being like my metric set of tools, and I like to think of flats as being American standard set of tools. And if you're a tool guy, you really want two separate boxes of tools. You don't want to keep all of your tools in the same box. You want to be able to reach in and grab what you want. So you don't want to confuse these two things. You want to keep them sort of separate but equal. Okay, so sharps and flats here. Let's do one more example. And in this example, let's look at, okay, so let's look at what if we had D sharp to, let's say, F flat. Looking at D sharp to F flat. And so once again, I recognize that I've got sharps and flats, and I can understand that this is immediately confusing. And so if you ever are faced with sort of a situation like this, then what you're going to want to do is kind of convert something. And in this case, we would realize that F flat is the same thing as E, and then we can go, oh yeah, D sharp to E, I can see that. That is right here, and that is definitely going to be a half step. So the distance here is just a half step. This is also just a half step. All right, let's do maybe one more example here that would make maybe a little bit more sense, something where we're not quite using some of these awkward notes, right? Let's take a look at maybe, how about if we had F sharp and if I asked you the distance from F sharp to B flat. And we would look at something like this and recognize immediately I've got a sharp and I've got a flat. And okay, so what do I want to do? Well, I have the choice of converting. I can either convert my sharp to a flat, or I can convert my flat to a sharp. Since we've converted sharps to flats before, we converted flats to our naturals before, let's go ahead and convert our sharp. Let's do something a little bit different in this one. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is convert sharps to flats. And I recognize that F sharp is going to be the same exact note as G flat. So now I have the distance from G flat to B flat. And let's think about what is that. So let's write it all out here. We've got G flat, which would then go to G, to A flat, which would then go to A, which would then go to B flat. And then let's go ahead and count that up. We've got a half step, plus a half step, plus a half step, plus a half step. That's 1 half, 2 half, 3 half, and finally 4 half. So I have the distance of 4 half steps, which is, I can reduce that. Well, let's see, that gives me 2 over 1, and that's going to give me 2 whole steps. 2 whole steps. Okay, so there's an easy way of being able to figure out the distance between two notes. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you've really enjoyed what you've seen so far, please just go ahead and click that subscribe button for me. It'll help keep us going so we can put out more great content for you.